guys, it's not often I make 2 videos in one day, but I needed to get this out there as well. Fears that the Palma volcano could erupt, sparking mega tsunami that will engulf Britain. This is something I've been watching for a long time now, is Cumbre vieja, which is part of the islands, the Canary Islands. Experts are saying, or have been saying for a long time, that when the Palma volcano explodes, it could cause a landslide of Cumbre vieja into the Atlantic Ocean, which would set off a mega tsunami, which would head towards the east coast of the United States, Spain and Britain. So I just wanted to quickly bring up this, giving me lots of trouble, this webpage, but basically it's from the Mirror. It was published today on the 11th of October, and it's basically saying that there's been around 40 tremors in the last 4 hours.
Police have to catch a killer.
We need to know where he's been. A part of crime.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so there's been 40 tremors in the last 48 hours, and there's concerns that the volcano could blow and spark a mega tsunami, which would affect Britain as well as Spain and the US East Coast. They've been rocked by dozens of small tremors between 1.5 and 2.7. As you know, with volcanoes, there's usually some tremors, and sometimes those tremors can be in the hundreds of tremors over a span of hours or days. This one is of particular interest because of the results of what could happen if there was a landslide into the Atlantic. It would cause that mega tsunami that everyone's been talking about and has popped up more recently. In line with that, I wanted to bring your attention to a Family Guy episode with this song called You've Got a Lot to See, which Brian is singing to this old lady.
Just quite how it all will end. So
as you can see there, back a little bit more. So he's singing this song to this lady. And
just quite.
The cards he places down is a volcano, a nuclear mushroom cloud, tidal wave.
Quite how it all will.
And the volcano explosion, as well as George W. Bush. Now I think that the sequence of these cards may be in reverse. So we've already had George W. Bush. That's gone. The event to come after, I believe, would be
it all will.
The volcano exploding, then causing the tsunami, which, if it knocked out the power grid and affected the backup power as well, then it would result in a nuclear explosion or a series of nuclear explosions along the East Coast. I bring your attention to the Indian Point nuclear plant, which is located in New York, and that plant has had loads of safety issues, and they're planning to shut it down in the next 3 or 4 years. So if something like this was to affect a nuclear plant like that, for example, then yeah, you could have a nuclear catastrophe on your hands, as it shows in these sets of cards. I'll play it one more time.
Just quite how it all will end. So hurry, 'cause you've got a lot to see.
So just from there, there's just this 8-minute kind of short documentary that I'd like to play, and that will be the end of the video.
Each younger, further to the north. This meant that the western side of the volcano was becoming deeply unstable. The whole of this flank was moving towards the sea as a single block.
The Swiss scientists began to calculate what would happen then. They had to build a new model to estimate the size of the mega tsunami this event would create. The Cumbre Vieja landslide would be thousands of times larger than any that the scientists had studied before. Because of this, their experiments could only give an approximate figure for the dimensions of the wave.
Of course, there's a huge difference in scale between the Cumbre Vieja collapse and its physical model in laboratory. We've tried to err on the side of caution whenever we made our calculations, using conservative assumptions. But nevertheless, what we found when we ran the model was very disturbing.
The Swiss scientists' final calculations produced an extraordinary wave.
If the Cumbre Vieja were to collapse as one single block, it would create a giant mega tsunami with an initial wave height of 650 meters and a wavelength of 30 to 40 kilometers, traveling westwards across the Atlantic with speeds up to 720 kilometers an hour towards America.
The scale of this produced a feeling of unreality as one realized what could happen.
This event would be so huge that it will affect not only the people on the island, but people far away on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. People who've never even heard of La Palma will be affected by this event. There is evidence that seems to show collapses like La Palma create mega tsunami that really can cross whole oceans and devastate distant continents. Scientists know that one of the last volcanic landslides in the Canaries happened here on a neighboring island to La Palma. When a section of the island collapsed around 120,000 years ago, it launched a mega tsunami which would have swept across the Atlantic towards the Americas. Simon Day believes that evidence for its destructive power can be seen thousands of miles away in the Bahamas. He believes the huge wave reshaped some of these islands, blasting these chevron-shaped ridges up to 10 kilometers long across parts of the Bahamian coastline. The wave also ripped vast boulders from off the ocean floor, some over 1,000 tons in weight, and dropped them high above sea level.
This was astonishing. Here was evidence for an event so extraordinary that it could really only be produced by something as catastrophic as an ocean island collapse.
So when is the next catastrophic event going to happen? The geologists had discovered the Cumbre Vieja could collapse during some future volcanic eruption. The difficulty, however, is in knowing when this will happen.
We have no idea when the next eruption will occur on the summit of the Cumbre Vieja. In recorded history, there have been eruptions in 1949, in 1712, in 1646. So it looks as though there is an eruption up there once every 2 centuries or so, on average. The last eruption was 50 years ago, so it is likely that sometime during the next century, there will be another eruption up there.
Tourists in America and the Canaries shouldn't cancel their holidays. The next summit eruption is unlikely to happen for decades, and it may take many more eruptions before the flank of the volcano is pushed into the Atlantic. The problem is, scientists cannot tell.
There could be 5 more summit eruptions of the Cumbre Vieja before the western flank collapses. There could be 10, there could be 20. On the other hand, the west flank could collapse during the next eruption. We simply don't know. But put it this way, if I was living in Miami or New York and I heard that the Cumbre Vieja was erupting, I'd be keeping a very close eye on the news.
The geological evidence now shows that La Palma may well be the next volcanic island to collapse. And when it does so, it will create a devastating natural disaster.
Well, the first thing that you'd feel, actually, would be seismic activity, earthquakes, because the collapse is going to be related to an eruption.
As the forces within the volcano built up to the point where they will begin to overcome the friction forces holding the flank in place, the flank will begin to move towards the sea.
And then at some point, the rock will fail on a major scale. And this huge chunk of rock, maybe 20 kilometers long or more, will start to slide into the sea.
waves initially here would be many hundreds of meters high, and those waves would all be moving out into the ocean, spreading out laterally, but with a lot of the energy heading across the Atlantic towards the coast of the Americas.
Looking down on it, it'll look unbelievable. It'll look as if the island is falling apart, generating these huge waves which are fanning outwards to reach the eastern coast of the United States.
The waves would take about 8 hours to travel between here and the coast of America. Just enough time to get the message out, to warn people that this event was happening. But unless evacuation plans were incredibly efficient, it would not be enough time to get everybody out of the affected areas. The areas at risk include cities like Miami, parts of Boston, the coastal areas and suburbs of New York.
We're standing on the beach in what is presently Miami. The very first effect you'd probably see is what we call drawback. The ocean would suddenly just pull away. We'd see a tide, a low tide like you've never seen before in your life. It would be actually spellbinding.
This will be the biggest natural catastrophe in history.
There is a problem with all major natural catastrophes. Because we've never experienced these things, we don't think they're going to happen to us, so we ignore them. But events like these have occurred throughout geological history. They're not going to stop happening just because humans now inhabit the Earth. La Palma is going to collapse into the Atlantic. It's not a question of if.
It's a question of when. So, yeah, I just wanted to bring your attention to the activities that are taking place on La Palma and with cumbre, vieja, and landslide that could possibly lead to a mega tsunami, which would devastate the east coast of America as well as the UK and Spain. The last thing I just want to point out is in relation to Revelation 8:7 kind of onwards, and this is when it's talking about the first angel sounding the trumpet. The first angel sounded his trumpet, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood. It was hurled down on the earth. A third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. And then the part I think might be which could relate to a collapse of cumbre vieja. Sorry, I think I've gone past it. Yes, that's a bit further down. So yeah, there we have the first angel sound their trumpet. It's the second angel, which could relate to the landslide of the volcano going into the Atlantic Ocean, which is the second angel sounded his trumpet, and something like a huge mountain all ablaze was thrown into the sea. A third of the sea turned into blood, a third of all living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. So I just wanted to kind of point out that particular verse in relation to this potential tsunami from this volcano. And that's it. Hopefully that's all the videos for today. But if there's